I'd now like to introduce to centre stage Hayley McMillan. Hayley is with the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, and she is from the Method to Market project. She's in fact the project leader, and don't forget to pop any of those live Q&A questions up for any of our presenters at any point in their talks, and we'll get to them soon. Welcome, Hayley.
Hi everyone, it's wonderful to be here with you this afternoon to delve into a question that we first asked ourselves at the conception of the From Method to Market project. How do on-farm improvements affect your environmental stewardship credentials? Now, having a means of answering that question cost effectively could not be more pertinent than it is right now. And there's a few reasons for that. So particularly pre-COVID, we were starting to see some very negative mainstream media attention on the red meat industry. For instance, headlines like 5 ways the meat on your plate is killing the planet, or can we feed the world and stop deforestation? Depends on what's for dinner. And these sorts of headlines were even overshadowing some pretty significant achievements by the red meat industry, such as the 57% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions since 2005. And therefore had a lot of potential to begin to erode social license. So right from the outset, it was clear that we needed to be able to cost effectively demonstrate environmental stewardship. Now, that's a somewhat negative example. Let's get more positive. So around this time, the red meat industry was establishing some pretty hefty sustainability targets, and they were doing that predominantly through the Australian beef sustainability framework. Obviously now we also have the Australian sheep sustainability framework, which is fantastic. The Red Meat Advisory Council was really starting to weigh in on this topic. And of course, we had the longer running Carbon Neutral 2030 initiative by Meat and Livestock Australia. And what was needed at this time was not just a pathway to achieve these targets, but also a pathway to measure these targets on farm. It was also around this time that we had several government-funded environmental credit markets. And at that time, there was $2.5 billion on offer. The catch was that in order to participate, producers needed to make a change in terms of their management on farm, and then measure and demonstrate that change in terms of environmental outcomes. So whether it be emissions reduction or carbon sequestration with the Emissions Reduction Fund, co-benefits under the Land Restoration Fund, or biodiversity outcomes. Another co-benefit scheme, the Agricultural Biodiversity Stewardship Program, had just been announced at that time. And so again, we're really quite reliant on having tools and technologies, software, to be able to report the outcomes under these schemes in some cost-effective way. Since then, there's increasingly a new reason to look for ways to demonstrate good environmental stewardship on farm. And those are premium brands of the future. When we think about what they might entail in terms of environmental claims, that's really been driven at the moment by major processors and retailers. And the themes that are coming out something around carbon, so whether it be low carbon or carbon neutral, perhaps a biodiversity friendly claim, and certainly McDonald's is a key driver of a deforestation free red meat at this point in time. So with all of those brands, absolutely crucial that we have a means of consistently and accurately verifying the claims that are being made, and a means of providing transparency and integrity behind those claims. So at the beginning of the project, we were really asking the question of what is available to cost effectively demonstrate good environmental stewardship on farm. And rather than wandering in the dark, we decided to try and put sustainability on a page. So we had some clear objectives in terms of looking for remote sensing technologies and spatial capability that could potentially satisfy some of the things that are important in terms of environmental markets and red meat, premium red meat markets. So we found that grazing systems could be neatly split into three main themes, those being natural capital, animal performance, grazing business performance, and economics. And when we put the tools, technologies, software to the test on each of these themes, we were pleasantly surprised. So for instance, in that natural capital theme there at the top, we've got several subcategories like crop and pasture production, land condition, native woody vegetation, native pasture in terms of extent, and native fauna. And it didn't seem to matter which one of those themes we went to. There was either something that had been developed to satisfy those themes and those units of measurement, or there was something in development, or there was at the very least one or two things at the proof of concepts phase. And that is really exciting for the red meat industry. And making some headway to increasing producer participation in environmental markets and premium red meat markets. On to the animal performance theme now. And we've got categories there like average age at first joining, conception, weaning rate, cow-calf loss, average weaning weight, and production efficiency. And basically, in Australia, we're lucky to already have several prominent herd management software companies available to producers to submit what is actually quite fragmented data. It comes from a number of different sources like scan data from weighing at the crush, or processor feedback data, or even just numbers written down at branding or weaning. And the best part about those, renowned platforms that are already being used to a certain extent by the grazing industry is that they are now looking to combine with the platforms supporting natural capital, remote sensing technology. And they're doing that with a third-party intermediary. An example is an evolving collaboration with Pear Tree. And the objective there is essentially to enable producers to log on to a single platform and be able to pull key grazing business performance and economic stats from all of that natural capital and animal performance data. For instance, imagine being able to log onto a single platform that digests all of that data and spits out a whole of farm carbon account. That would be pretty cool. And it's on its way. So we definitely need to watch this space. So following that review of tools, technology, software, spatial capacity at a state and national scale, and also a review of barriers and opportunities for grazing systems in environmental markets and premium red meat markets, we then wanted to contribute further to this space in terms of testing a few of the recommendations that we've already come up with through those review processes, in terms of demonstrating on farm what something like going low carbon or carbon neutral looks like, and a variety of other activities with our project partners. So we've got several formal project partners, and I'll just list off some of the key activities that we're involved with them. So a great example would be the targeted data that we've collected in the last 12 months to contribute to remote sensing technology development and validation. For instance, with the Queensland Department of Environment and Science Herbarium team, we're contributing on-farm biocondition data from a range of land types and condition states and different stages of vegetation, to a larger training data set that DES has already developed, in an effort to help them with a proof of concept study that they're currently conducting that looks to make biocondition to some degree a remotely sensed item. Now, that is super exciting, because anything that you can do to bring remote sensing to biodiversity metrics is hugely important, because these things are notoriously difficult and costly to measure in terms of time, labor, and expertise. So any inroads we can make there will be fantastic for industry. We're also working with our project partner SIBO Labs to further their existing model for pasture biomass. So these guys are essentially leading the charge in terms of estimating pasture biomass on farm, as well as estimating woody vegetation on farm. And they can do this across a significant period of time historically to show what has happened historically on individual properties or businesses. And although their spatial model is already has already been developed, what we're doing with them is essentially refining that model in helping them to refine that model in difficult to measure areas by collecting targeted training data in areas where canopy cover is affecting estimates of pasture biomass, and in areas where currently SIBO have limited on-ground data. So for instance, in Southwest Queensland. We're also working with Integrity Ag and Environment to produce baseline emissions from historic herd data for each of the 8 participating grazing business partners, and also to demonstrate for each of those businesses tailored options to offset those baseline emissions. And obviously, all of that is any activity, any improvement you make on farm is going to cost something. So we're taking that one step further with Ian McLean from Bush Agribusiness and producing cost-benefit analyses for some of these environmental interventions. And that is going to be a really nice set of red meat case studies that provide an example for red meat producers of what something like going carbon neutral or halving baseline emissions looks like on farm. Now, we're running short on time here, but I'll just mention we also have several informal partners as well, and this list is increasing. It's fantastic, the response we've had from industry in regards to the project and others wanting to get involved. And also that throughout that review process, one of the key barriers that we identified was a lack of targeted information for the grazing industry in what is a very saturated and complex topic. It's sort of difficult for producers to even know where to turn. Well, it's difficult for advisors, let alone red meat producers, to know where to turn for reliable information and information that they can then use to make decisions within their own businesses. So one thing that we've done as a result of the Method to Market project is created the Carbon Neutral 2030 Grazier Network. And the call for registrations went out about a month ago, and we've had such a wonderful response across Australia from businesses of all shapes and sizes, both beef and sheep grazing businesses. And I don't think we've seen the full extent of participation within the network just yet. We've had a wonderful response from advisors like Landcare Australia wanting to help us get the network out there. And basically, I just have to emphasize that there's no telling what's possible through this network. At this point, we're committed to a quarterly newsletter, but I'm really excited to see where this thing ends up. I think we can do some pretty special things within this network. So if you haven't registered, whether you're an advisor or a grazier, please jump onto the Future Beef website and type in Carbon Neutral 2030 Grazier Network and register for the inaugural newsletter at the end of this month. I'll have to leave it there. We've definitely run out of time. I apologise for going over. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to questions.